In a world obsessed with rankings, two men dare to chisel greatness out of metaphorical granite, one wildly subjective opinion at a time. This show, every episode, we select four icons from a single topic and immortalize them in our own personal halls of fame. But this is not about what should be on the list. This is about what matters to us. It's our own personal mountains, and we can carve them however we see fit. Subjective? Absolutely. Debatable? Always. Set in stone? Until next week, welcome to the Mount Rushmore Show, where your top four says everything about you. I'm Mike Mintz. He's Joe Mintz. And Joe, this week, icon is really probably the word that best describes this particular topic.
Yeah, apologies in advance. We might overuse our favorite word here, but to do it for anyone, I feel we owe it to this man. Who are we talking about, Mike?
Well, this is our top four Brad Pitt movies, and I guess we'll just open with that because the reality is, and we were talking before we got started here. There's not many actors from this era that have withstood the test of father time, right? Have been able to put together a 30 plus year career, and to do it as consistently as Brad Pitt has done.
Yeah, we did the Tom Cruise one not too long ago, and I feel like both of them are in the same era of movie star, where both draw people to see the movie not because of the story or the IP, but for the person. And we don't have many of those anymore. In fact, I can't think of any that are up and coming. Unless you do a Marvel or DC movie, it's hard to draw people to the box office. But Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, neck and neck, still bring people in just for them.
Yeah, and Brad Pitt's got a huge movie that just opened this weekend. I think Thursday at midnight. Friday was really last couple days have been really kind of the big opening weekend. I think pulling in right around 40 million for its opening weekend, over 100 worldwide. So F1, which has been this uh, it's been this monster spectacle, I guess is the best way to describe it.
I would agree. And I think America has become fascinated with F1 because of Netflix, the Drive to Survive series.
Hmm.
And that's led to even growing U.S. race attendance. So it feels like a perfect cultural moment, both with the movie coming out and America's love of the sport. And what better to help bridge the worlds of speed, style, and cinema than Pitt? But Mike, do you have any connection or fascination with F1?
F1 specifically, not a whole lot, but racing in general is something I've always enjoyed, especially cinematically throughout the years. I remember going to the movie theater to watch Days of Thunder, the Tom Cruise vehicle. I guess pun intended there. I remember watching the Sylvester Stallone driven film, which was more about like open cars, and some of these other films throughout the time. I was not. I've always known about F1, and to me, it's always been this idea of the premier racing league. Like if you're gonna win at that level, really you are the probably the best race car driver in the world.
I kind of looked at it as an international sport, whereas America loved NASCAR.
Yeah.
Then if you were in Europe or overseas, you followed F1. Also, if you want to watch F1, you have to get up at like 6 in the morning because of the
Yeah.
difference in time zone. So that kind of separated the two as far as popularity goes. But now with Netflix and that series, we got to know the drivers and the personalities. And similar to other sports, take boxing for example, we're more drawn to the
Mhm.
athletes and their lives to care about the sport than just the sport for sport's sake.
Yeah, and I mean a guy you can't avoid is Lewis Hamilton. I mean, he's a name that's become a household name to even people that don't follow F1. I mean, it's a name that pops up all the time. One of these guys, and he's this F1's one of those tough ones because there's really no guarantees, and there's so much competition from race to race that to be consistently good at that sport is probably one of the most challenging ones.
My first experience with F1 was really the documentary Senna, which was
Oh
an
yeah.
amazing, amazing movie if you haven't seen it. In fact, I think they turned it into a Netflix movie or series as well that was scripted. But goes back to Lewis Hamilton. Part of the reason we like him is because F1 series on Netflix allow us to learn about his personal life, which is interesting. You
Mhm.
can't be an enigma in sports like this anymore. You have to reveal the character so we care about the outcome, not just because they drive the best car, promote the best sponsor, but because we care about the person, or we really care about the person losing as the villain. One of the two is what really draws attention to a sport like F1, and it's worked incredibly successfully. And we've seen other sports mimic that Netflix style series of compelling characters in other sports too.
Yeah, and Hamilton plays a role. Yeah, I got to see F1 this weekend, so I went
Oh, you
out.
did?
I did. I paid the money for IMAX, and it was worth every cent.
IMAX is the way to do it, Mike.
The sound. I mean, for a movie like that, this is and it kind of reminded me of the old school event movie where you go with the big effects, the big sound, the big actors, Harvey R. Bardem, Brad Pitt, those guys, and everything felt in a world that we're obsessed essentially, or at least Hollywood seems to be obsessed with superhero movies and these effects that are CGI. And I'm sure there's plenty of CGI in this movie, but it is so seamless. It just felt like, and I know that Kosinski filmed a lot of this practically too. Like, I want to say that they did an interview with Kosinski about how fast Brad Pitt was going, and he said at one point they had him over 180 miles per hour. So a lot of it feels really legitimate. There's moments in this film where I literally gasped, like the whole and the theater was packed too, makes the experience so much better because we were laughing and gasping. It just felt like a throwback to these big style Hollywood movies.
It reminds me of the time when Paul Newman did a movie about racing, and that turned into a love of racing. In fact, he did his own. This was IndyCar at the time,
Yep.
but tried to become a professional IndyCar driver. And it started with him getting ready for a movie. And Brad Pitt is not dissimilar. He has not just been starring in this movie, but he's been living it. He's been on real tracks, surrounded by real teams, doing his own driving and embracing the F1 culture. So he is now become part of the sport, so to speak, as an ambassador, which he wasn't otherwise before getting ready for the role.
Yeah, and that translates amazingly well to the screen. I know Kozinski, who had done Top Gun Maverick and filmed in the fighter jets for real. He wanted to bring the sense of realism to it, and there's lots of racing. Look, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a ton of racing in this, and they filmed a lot, and it's all very intense. It's one of those movies you almost walk away from breathing almost a sigh of relief, and you need to wind down from sitting in the theater for 2.5 hours, but you feel just I just felt like just excited the whole time, so it was great.
That's cool. I might wait for it to come on Apple TV because I imagine since they produced it, it won't be long. But if I were to do it, IMAX would be the way to go, Mike. So good
Yeah,
call.
turn up your stereo as loud as you can get it. Let's put it that way. So
I don't know if my neighbors would love that. I
they
live in a
would be.
condo. But I want to talk about Pitt again. He's been promoting the film very ambitiously. And you can
Yes.
tell when someone really loves a project they did by how they promote it. And he's actually been more open than you see out of most movie stars. I actually listened to him on Dax Shepard's podcast, Armchair Expert, where he did an over hour sit down, which is rare for movie stars of his caliber. Usually it's, the Fallon show or snippets on the red carpet. But he's been speaking very vulnerable and provided some humor about where he is in his life. He seems at peace, reflective. He just seems in his element, very comfortable. It's rare we get to see a star of his caliber so comfortably himself, whereas we see so much facade on avoiding the hard questions about where they are. Tom Cruise, I love him, but you can't get him from Mission Impossible to talk about anything other than the stunts and his love of popcorn, it feels like.
Well, and I mean, Cruz has been burnt in the past by being
He
too open.
has. Sometimes better to keep your mouth shut, I guess.
Yeah. Excuse me.
So
I think
today, I'm excited about honoring the man who's been captivating audience, to your point, for over 30 years. And he seems to have somehow been everything on screen. Action hero, oddball character actor. Oscar winner, heartthrob. So I love to talk just about Brad Pitt and the archetype that he's become. He's always, I would say, occupied a fascinating space in Hollywood. He's not the pure franchise driver like I would say Tom Cruise is, but he has the same on-screen charisma and work ethic, I would say. He's a beautiful man, yes. But unlike many classic leading men, he's never been afraid to get weird, be vulnerable, or step into the background when it serves a story. I think of some of those roles like Burn After Reading, 12 Monkeys, Assassination Jesse James. But I think what makes him great is his range. He can be cool and detached in something like Ocean's 11, rough and raw, funny. He can be heartfelt. So I want to pick in this Mount Rushmore not just his best movies, but the ones that showcase the full spectrum of what Brad Pitt brings to the screen.
I think that's a great setup, Joe, and nice bit of criteria. And you're right. Brad Pitt's shown a whole range of what he can do, and a lot of, for me, some of his best movies are some of these ensemble pieces, and it was kind of tough for me to cut down to which ones I feel are the Brad Pitt movies. So that was a little bit of my criteria too.
If he's in it, Mike, it can be a Brad Pitt movie. That's my thought.
That's a really fair
If you
point,
walk
Joe.
away being like Brad Pitt stole the show, that's worth a Mount Rushmore.
Well, and he's certainly stolen the show in quite a few movies. So, well, let's go ahead and kick it off. You want me to go with number one, Joe?
Go for it, Mike.
All right, I'm gonna pick one that is probably the a consensus one. I don't know if you're sharing it or not, but I know a lot of people probably would put this on their list. And it's a movie that I saw in real time in 1999, and that is Fight Club. Fight Club is one of the all-time. It's Brad Pitt's obviously, Tyler Durden in this film, Edward Norton as well. David Fincher, great director. That's as far as directors go, one of those all-time greats as well. And the twist in this movie is killer. It's one of those you don't see it coming. At least when I watched it, I had no idea. When that moment happened, I had to stop the VHS. I had to stop the videotape at the time and rewind it because I was like, what? No way. Obviously, Fight Club's going to have a cultural impact. It's still talked about in the world. It's strange. It's wonderful. Fincher's vision is at the same time surreal, combined with an edge that's as sharp as a razor blade. This thing is just realistically coming at you and talking about topics that just seem at the time in 99 were you did not talk about. They were the edgiest of edgy that you could get. On top of all of those things, it's just a fun watch. It is fun from front to back. Great movie, Fight Club. Book based on the book Chuck Palahniuk as well, which I've heard the book is. I haven't read it, but I've heard that the book is excellent in its own way. So
Mike, we're going to share this one, and this is one of my favorite movies of all time.
yeah,
It's the unanimous number one is Fight Club. And Brad Pitt at the tail of the 90s, he was already a star, and he already teamed up with David Fincher. I don't know if you remember Seven with Morgan
I
Freeman,
do.
another fantastic film, which may or may not be on the Mount Rushmore later. But I would say Fight Club cemented him as a generational, as a, dare I say, icon.
There you go.
Tyler Durden became one of the most quoted parodies and dissected characters, arguably, in film history. And he brought a manic charisma to Durden. He was equal parts cult leader, philosopher, and rebel. He had a physical transformation, delivery, and I would say undeniable screen presence that made the role unforgettable. And he was able to make chaos very seductive. And in doing so, I would say it was one of the most memorable performances of his career. But the movie aged like fine wine because it bombed at the box office, but it later became a cult classic and a touchstone, shall I say, for Gen X and millennial angst, and definitely a definitive role in his filmography. And it feels even more relevant today. We see a lot of things in our culture around the manosphere and incels and toxic masculinity and why men feel the way they do. There's been a lot of fodder around that the last few years, which wasn't talked about in the late 90s. And it dissected a subsect of men that we didn't otherwise see revealed that is still arguably relevant. And I feel bad even saying the movie out loud because we all know the first rule of Fight Club.
Right. That's
I actually
that's
have a
that's
poster
a
of the
great
rules on my wall. Um, but and
first
honestly,
two
e-
rules. Yeah.
every young kid who saw that movie or 20 something, they all wanted the Brad Pitt body. That was considered the ideal male physique of alpha, lean. Every girl wanted, every guy wanted to have.
That's a really great insight into the viewpoints of the time of that movie. I liked how you said, made chaos seductive, but really it was because of Pitt's performance. I mean, Fincher's great, don't get me wrong, and the movie is well written and all of it's excellent, but it's Brad Pitt is magnetic in it, and you can't help but walk away going, that was, I want that. I want to be that kind of, I want to be Tyler
Yeah.
Durden. I think there's
He's
a lot
he's
of people
evil,
that
but you
did.
kind of
Yeah.
want to be
So,
that. So seductive, the power he has.
yep. Yeah,
All right,
it's one of those. I love Fight Club. It's one of my all-time favorites.
easy one. Well, hit us with number two, Mike.
Oh, all right. So hit you with number two. Well, we've already brought it up, and I guess we might as well go with it. Another David Fincher film. This is from '95, and this is Seven. These two were my easiest. When you told me about the concept for this podcast this week, immediately these two films came into my mind. I was like, oh, it's Fight Club and it's Seven. Both David Fincher, who I really like too. But more than this is a completely different film than Fight Club. It's got some of the gritty realism to it, but it comes down to a trio of powerhouse performances. Brad Pitt, and it also sets this template for gritty detective noir from the 90s, even still felt a little bit today in these detective films and TV shows. But it teams up Brad Pitt's gritty detective with his partner Morgan Freeman, and they're going up against one of the all-time greatest villains in cinematic history, in my opinion. Kevin Spacey breathes life, terrifying life, into the serial killer John Doe. And this movie is not for the faint of heart. You may have heard of this film and been like, oh, I gotta go see Seven. I'm telling you right now that Seven is a rough way to spend an hour and a half at the movies because it is, by definition, a Greek tragedy.
It is dark the way it ends. I did not expect that. And my favorite line that I get every time I hear the word box, I say, "What's in the
Oh,
box?"
God.
And it's effed up that I'm using that word because it's such a dark, terrible scene, but it's almost become comedic fodder, that line, how quoted it is. But also, Kevin Spacey, fantastic in that. And fun fact about that movie, he was never released to have been in the movie. He did zero promotion. It was never told he was going to be in it, and he wasn't in the trailer. So it was many audiences surprised when they watched it to see a guy who already had won an Academy Award for The Usual Suspects to be in this movie in a very dark, gritty supporting character.
Yeah, and Spacey's performance is one of those. It's the character of John Doe is one of those ones that you never forget about. And I compare a lot of villains to John Doe these days. I'm like, oh, but how does it measure up to Spacey's performance?
Mhm.
So
Um, I didn't share this one with you with Seven, even though I agree it's a great movie. It was questionable. But for my number two, I'm going to go a different direction. Less dark, not David Fincher. We're going to go with 2001's Ocean's 11 with Rusty
oh yeah.
Ryan. He was coming off some dramatic turns in Meet Joe Black and then Snatch at the time, and he joined a big all-star ensemble led by George Clooney and Steven Soderbergh. Um, Ocean's 11 wasn't just a heist movie; it felt like a vibe. It's one of my also favorite movies. It's so fantastic. It's so rewatchable. It gets me every time. Um, and why it's iconic is Rusty was the embodiment of effortless cool. He was always eating, usually a shrimp cocktail, always calm, and he always one step ahead. And his comic timing and chemistry with the rest of the cast helped make Rusty a real standout in the movie among A-list stars. And I would say it kicked off a slick, stylish trilogy, obviously 12 and 13 to come. And it showed that Pitt could lead a blockbuster without being the loudest guy in the room. It's a performance of, I would argue, restraint and coolness that helped define the run he had in the early 2000s.
I think Ocean's 11 is one of those, like you were saying, it's just one of those great movies. Soderbergh, of course, it's a remake of a Rat Pack film, and if you're gonna do a Rat Pack film, you're gonna have to bring in some pretty heavy hitters, and they did it. I mean, Clooney, Damon, Brad Pitt, and to me, it exceeds the original far and away. The original I thought was, I've seen bits and pieces of it, never cared for it. I feel like the original was a bad movie until you take a guy like Steven Soderbergh to go, oh, let's remake a movie that really wasn't great and make it great. And I think they nailed it, knocked it out of the park. Pitt's character is steals the show in a lot of cases. When you think about ensemble movies, everybody's kind of playing their own character, and they always want to have something that's unique or interesting about them, and to try and fit within that group. But Brad Pitt seems to be able to elevate that idea of the ensemble where he almost comes across as more interesting than almost Clooney or some of the other characters that are more of the leads. And you want to see more of Pitt's character as the movie goes on.
Yeah. I love when he's put in as a supporting character because it just leaves you wanting more every
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, that's a great pick there, Joe. I'm gonna go with my number three here, and dude, I I'm still waffling on my choice. So I'm gonna go with 12 Monkeys.
Interesting.
This is a
Speaking
tough
of
one.
weird supporting characters,
It is, and he's playing a supporting character in this movie, and it's it's another one of those movies that is not very accessible, possibly to all audiences. Terry Gilliam, director, probably best known for his stuff with Monty Python. This is not a comedy movie by any stretch. It is a movie that is about time travel, but not in the way that is something that you've seen before in like Back to the Future or even another Bruce Willis one, which is Looper. This movie is a messy time travel movie where things don't even really make sense all the way through. In fact, this is probably worth a couple of watches before you get to it. But that's kind of what I love about 12 Monkeys is how convoluted the plot is and really, once you do get it, I feel like it's a satisfying understanding. Like, oh, I see it, some rewatchability to some degree. The performances are great. Obviously, Bruce Willis kills it, and him taking the doctor and all of that stuff. But it's Brad Pitt to me that really steals the show as this mental patient, environmentalist, nutcase, eco-terrorist kind of character that is so squirrely and chaotic that he leaves you wanting more of his performance, where he kind of is the side character in a great movie. His role is much bigger than that, even though it's not as big as the lead character.
I think not a great movie, but a great performance. And he
Hmm.
actually got nominated for the Academy Award, his first for this movie. Leading up to it, he was on a path to be the vanilla toast good looking guy, coming off Thelma and Louise, A River Runs Through It. This was a different direction. I think intentional at the time not to get typecast as a certain, good looking romantic type. And it worked. He got his Academy Award recognition. He could have went down a path of a great supporting actor, but when you got eyes like that, Pitt, they're gonna put you in some lead movies. So it didn't stick. But I Bruce Willis, very vanilla in that movie. The
Hmm.
movie itself is kind of hard to follow. It's very
Oh
confusing
yeah.
for me. But similar to the other themes of other movies we've picked so far, you just want more of Brad Pitt and what he brings to that movie and the table.
Yeah, and big swing, like you said, both for Brad Pitt and Bruce Willis in that film. That was a movie that was hard to market. Send it out to the folks who are expecting a Die Hard or a Brad Pitt vehicle, and you get 12 Monkeys. But to me, it's one of those ones that keeps peeking out of his filmography. For whatever reason, I keep being drawn back to it. It's weird, but it's also wonderful. I like it.
My third pick is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as Cliff Booth.
Oh yeah.
And at this point in his career, Pitt had nothing left to prove, but he delivered one of his best performances. He was a stuntman driving through the changing tides of 1969 Hollywood. He gave us a very quiet, confident, and then totally magnetic performance alongside Leonardo DiCaprio, another compelling leading man, and also a Tarantino film. And his last one, his ninth, before hopefully delivering his 10th, which rumors have it, Pitt is going to be attached to, which I cannot wait for. But this movie is iconic. It delivered him his first acting Academy Award as a supporting character. He previously had won an Academy Award as a producer on 12 Years a Slave. And he oozes charisma without even trying in this. Cliff character is very mysterious, dangerous, but also lovable. And this is a character we're talking about allegedly killed his wife. But we still kind of take the side of Cliff because you just like him. Um, it's so cool to see him just driving through LA in his Cadillac, one arm on the wheel, throwing down at the Manson Ranch. He commanded every scene. And even a guy taking mushrooms, I don't want to spoil the ending for those that haven't seen it, but there's one of the best endings of a movie and performances at the end of that movie as Brad Pitt takes acid. And let's just say the Manson murder dilemma happened on Cliff Booth's doorstep. It would have went down much different than history remembers it. And I would say this is one of my favorite Tarantino's as well. And he's made aging look cool in this movie and reminded everyone he's still that guy.
This movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, is like you said. I mean, it's one of those movies that has so much going for it. From the performances, obviously, Tarantino's nearing the end of his what he's suggested was be his ten film run. For whatever reason, putting that limit on himself.
Why not?
And really, and why not? But coming at it. You know what's funny is like if you're gonna put a limit on you like that, obviously people are gonna look at that number 10, but that number 9 might be one of his all-time greats with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You brought up the character of Cliff Booth, who not even really arguably, he's the hero of the film quietly. He seems like a side character, but he's the one that goes through the hero's journey. He does all of those things, and he's so compelling, Joe that I don't know if you heard this, but there is a work for a Cliff Booth's sidequel being directed by, of all people, David Fincher. So
That would be incredible. I love this movie so much that I read the book that came out after the movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a novel. And if you love this movie, love that character, read this book because it gives you all of the backstory on Cliff Booth and all the fascinations of what actually happened with him and his wife. And I won't spoil that for those that want to read the book. But Leonardo DiCaprio is equally compelling in that role in a very different way, as he's a very anxious, insecure, aging TV actor now trying to figure out what to do next. And Brad Pitt and Cliff Booth character is the perfect like therapist, calm side piece to the anxiousness and insecurity of Leo DiCaprio's character. And it made me really wish we all had a Cliff Booth in our life to relinquish our anxiety and remind us to be centered. Because I'm always trying to find a zen to the level of Cliff Booth. If there's any mantra I could have, it is that of Cliff Booth.
that's awesome. And he also fights Bruce Lee in that movie. So there's that
You can do
going
it
for
all.
it. So.
Renaissance man.
All right, I got one more, and you brought up Quentin Tarantino, so I might as well. This is another Tarantino film, and this is Inglourious Bastards, where Brad Pitt uh, plays a role that is to me, this is his most iconic piece. This is where he is this leader of this group of Nazi hunters, World War II revisionist
Nazis,
history.
Mike. Nazis.
Nazis, yes. Aldo Rain, the Apache, right? And he plays it with a vocalization that is he's never done anything like that in his career, in my opinion. This characterization. He's playing a character that's not at all anything like he's done before. When we talk about range, this is to me and one of the all-time funniest performances in a very seemingly serious film. You got to understand the character that Christoph Waltz plays in this movie is terrifying. And there's scenes in here that are just unbelievably dark. And what Brad Pitt brings to it is a certain levity that works within the film. It's not outside of it. It's not like he's in a different movie. He's within this film playing this character that is somehow humorous while talking about really heavy material. And it's got one of those, to me, I like Tarantino. I don't think he's a perfect director. Nobody is. If you're going to do only 10 films, they better be killer. And he's done pretty much nothing but great stuff. But this is, and I know this is the quote at the end, that this is his masterpiece. But to me, it really is. It's got one of those revisionist history endings that you just can't help but just love and be just kind of almost cheer for. It's great.
Yeah, good one to follow Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because Inglourious Basterds started a theme of his where he would take a historical time and real things and then change it into a Tarantino type ending that was more satisfying for audiences. That started with Inglourious Basterds with that incredible ending to what we all kind of wish could have happened versus and then Once Upon a
Right?
Time in Hollywood. And just super compelling to watch. Good pick. I think about Christoph Waltz in that movie as well. Another guy that's captivating. And obviously the bear alongside Brad
Oh,
Pitt,
yeah. Of
scalping
course.
Nazi heads. Just
Yep.
a great Tarantino movie.
Yeah, that's a great one. All right, Joe, I think what you got one more, right?
I have one more, and this is going to be a returning movie that we've discussed in our first ever podcast, and that's 2011's Moneyball, where he played
Oh,
Billy
yeah.
Bean. Um, Backstory, it's a book based on a book about baseball analytics. So, like, how good could this be? Sound on paper sounds very boring, but Moneyball could have delivered the opposite of that. It could have been a dry niche film, but he turned it into a compelling emotional story about failure, risk, and redemption, which is why it's on my Mount Rushmore of sports movies. Um, this is Pitt's most grounded and human performance. He's not flashy. He's not larger than life like some of our other roles he's in. He's just a guy trying to change the game, battling his own insecurities and his own past and own demons. And he has fantastic chemistry with Jonah Hill. And he delivers an Aaron Sorkin script that elevated the entire film. And Jonah Hill at the time was coming off of a string of comedic films, including Superbad. This was a turn performance for him. And when we saw him cast alongside Brad Pitt in a movie about baseball analytics, I thought this could be the downfall of both their careers. But it turned to be the opposite. Completely pivoted things for Jonah Hill and kept Pitt on an amazing trajectory that he's still exceeding every day. And Moneyball helped redefine modern sports movies as well and prove that Pitt was more than just a pretty face. He's a serious, nuanced actor. And he got an Oscar nomination from it as well. And I would say it remains one of his most respected roles.
Moneyball is one of those films that shouldn't work, but it does, and it's
Exactly.
so good that it has no business being as good as it is. And I think there's a lot to be said about the performances in this movie. Obviously, the writing from Sorkin is great, but writing is one thing. You got to be able to deliver. And Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, additionally, like it's a great cast that elevates already really good material into well, we both had this on our sports movies list, and it's well deserved. And it's also kind of the moment I felt like Brad Pitt kind of shifted gears a little bit. This was kind of the time was 2011, and that that almost next 10 years of what he's going to do from there, or 15 years from there, it almost felt like Pitt was shifting his gears a little bit into this. I'd hate to say Renaissance because he never really went anywhere, but this other part of his career that he's been into, which has been so good for so long.
Yeah, it feels like a chapter, like many of these movies, a pivot to show a side of Pitt we didn't otherwise know, that he would take us down in movies to come. But the apex started with the beginning of that chapter.
Yeah, I agree. What excellent pick. Moneyball's great.
Why don't you round home a summary of your four?
All right, so two easy ones for me were Fight Club and Seven, both David Fincher films, both 90s films, both iconic in their own ways, surreal to some degree, both very edgy. One, actually, both are chaotic and dark and twisted, and feature great performances from Brad Pitt in both of those. I went off the rails a little bit. I tossed and turned on this one, and for whatever reason, it kept coming back to me, and that's 12 Monkeys. Maybe not the most accessible film, but one that's definitely worth a rewatch if you've seen it before, and if you've only seen it once, certainly worth a rewatch. A twisted time travel caper that doesn't follow any of the rules that you expect, and Brad Pitt gives this performance in almost background but makes you it's so magnetic that you can't help but want more of what he's doing in that film. And then I rounded it home with Inglorious Bastards, my favorite Quentin Tarantino film, and he's got a lot to choose from. This was my one, the beginning of this revisionist history that Tarantino will bring to some of his later stuff. And the performance from Brad Pitt is so uniquely different than anything I think he's given in his career up until that point, and really anything since, and that's what makes it really stand out for me from his filmography at this point. All right, Joe, what do you got?
I got the unanimous number one that we shared, Fight Club. Obviously, the character we all wanted to be, but are afraid to admit it. Then we got Ocean's 11, the cool guy we all want to embody. Doesn't let anything phase him, along with a similar role he had in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as Cliff Booth. And then the serious sports movie in Moneyball, where he played just a real guy that you could resonate, connect with, and feel for in the process. But Brett, Mike, your four was also great, and that's what made this one so hard. Is he's got so many winners that picking just four is very compelling. So I'm very curious if you're listening to this and you want to share your four, if you agree, you like one of our lists more than the other, or if your list is completely different. I might agree with that as well. This was a hard one, but I'd like to close on this. Brad Pitt is one of the few actors um, who could retire tomorrow, and I would say still have one of the most versatile, impactful filmographies in Hollywood history. And he's not slowing down with this F1 movie. He's showing he still loves the craft, still wants to entertain, and still has more stories to tell. He's aging very gracefully, living very intentionally, and making art on his own terms, as you can tell. And if we can age half as well, both physically, emotionally, creatively, I would say we're doing just fine. So here's to Brad Pitt, our homage, a movie star, a character actor, and a guy who might just be hitting his most interesting stride yet.
Yeah, here's to what's next, Joe. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Well,
Hopefully, it's
you've
him and
heard our
Tarantino.
I would do it. I would love for it to be another Tarantino or the last Tarantino. Well, that's our list, and you've heard what we've had to say, but the real question is what would you carve onto your mountain? For Joe Mintz, I'm Mike Mintz, and this has been the Mount Rushmore Show.